The movie begins with Martin being concerned about his mother's bad health. Talking to his father, Paul, he expresses worry over his mother's health and asks when Paul will return home. Esther asked Paul if he needed someone for overtime work, but Paul asked her to close up. Esther headed to the warehouse. The lights suddenly switched off, and she waved her hands at the sensors to put them back on. When the lights turned back on, she noticed a rack of clothes moving. When she went to another room and switched off the lights, she saw a shadowy figure standing there, so she turned it back on, but there was nothing. She flickered the light several times, and the dark figure was right next to her. She turned the light back on and ran out of the room. She went to Paul to tell him what she saw, but he was on the phone with Martin, and he told her he needed to deal with it and go home. She told him to be careful and then left. Paul enters the warehouse and spots a dark figure squatting. He mistakenly believes it to be Esther and calls out to her. But as the figure arises, all the lights suddenly turn off. He waves his hands to trigger the lights back on, but when they return, the figure is closer. Attempting to escape, he trips over something and notices a scratch wound on his leg. Then he notices the figure cannot enter the light. He rushes to his office and turns on the light. Bravo for the quick thinking, Paul. Suddenly, the lights in his office also go out, which leaves Paul in the dark again, and that's not good. As the door slowly opens, he waits for someone to get in while holding a baseball bat, but he was grabbed from behind. After a while, he drops to the ground, covered in blood and dead. If you feel bad for Paul because he didn't make it, subscribe to the channel. Rebecca and Brett are in bed, and Brett has asked to stay for the night. Rebecca goes to the shower and tells him to leave because she has work the following day. After Brett leaves, we can see in the photos that she is the sister of Martin and Paul's stepdaughter. Martin was in bed when he overheard his mother Sophie talking. He entered her bedroom and found her speaking to something in the dark. Sophie noticed Martin and comforted him over the incident. Still, when Martin returned to bed, he saw a dark figure in the shadow behind Sophie. Shocked, he went to his room and locked himself in. Then, the doorknob of his door starts turning, but it was locked, so it did not open. The next day, Martin is having trouble staying awake at school. The nurse is unable to contact Sophie to inform her of this, so Rebecca is called into the nurse's office instead. A Child Protective Services agent questions Rebecca about Martin's living conditions. Rebecca tells the official that she doesn't live there anymore. She was asked how Sophie is holding up after Paul's death, and Rebecca tells her Sophie is taking her antidepressants. She took Martin to the house, but he asked to stay at her place for at least the night, and she told him that they would talk about it. As they are going to the house, he tells her their mother had been talking to a woman named Diana. Rebecca turned shocked and told him Diana wasn't real and that this has happened to her too. When they entered the house, it was entirely black. Martin goes to his room, and Rebecca begins talking to Sophie, accusing her of not taking her medication. They fight because Sophie refused to visit a therapist or go back on her medications. Then Rebecca tells her that she would make Martin stay with her until she got better. Martin is in his room packing when he hears a door creak. He goes to check, but the dark figure comes and slams the door. He goes to the living room and leaves with Rebecca, while Sophie follows them from behind, begging Rebecca not to take him. Rebecca and Martin get into Brett's car despite Sophie's efforts and leave. Martin settles into Rebecca's bed, and they eat dinner. Rebecca is awoken by the neon light flashing on and off that night. When she gets up, she notices a dark woman clawing on the floor. When she turns on the neon light, the woman is vanished. When the light goes out again, the woman stands and walks in her direction, but the neon light turns on. Then Rebecca runs to the light switch and turns it on. She went into the bathroom and sees Martin sleeping in a bathtub with a flashlight. The following day, the child service agent arrives at Rebecca's place and tells her that she can't just take Martin. She tells her that there are procedures she has to go through and takes Martin. After they leave, Rebecca notices a scratch mark on the floor and saw the name Diana written next to a stick figure. Then, in a flashback, Rebecca, as a child, is drawing her family when she hears a sound and turns. When she turned back, her sketchbook was gone, and she hears the scratching sound from a closet and goes there to turn the light on. Her sketchbook then drops to the ground. When she sees her drawing, she sees the stick figure named Diana is added, and her father is crossed out. Rebecca and Brett go to Sophie's house. While searching around, Rebecca discovers a box of medical records and studies in Paul's office. Along with them, she finds a recording of a doctor in a mental hospital that Sophie was admitted to as a youngster. The audio states that the doctor befriended a young patient called Diana. Diana was asked why she was obsessed with Sophie and why she hurt her. Diana told the doctor that Sophie was her friend, but she hurt her because she was getting better. Diana had a severe skin issue that prevented her from spending time in direct sunlight. She was accidentally burned to ashes by hospital staff while attempting to execute an experimental therapy on her using strong light. She saw photos of the chair with Diana's burn mark on it. Rebecca goes into her old room and tries to turn on the lamp, but it didn't have a bulb. She found her old drawing that Diana changed in the drawer, and as she looks at it, the door closes. She screams, calling for Brett, but she hears Diana talking, telling her to stay away. Then Diana picks her up by the hair, and Rebecca screams. Brett opens the door, and Diana disappears. Martin and Sophie come to the house and decide to have a movie night. While they're watching a movie, Sophie turns off the light and starts telling him the story of Diana. Martin begs Sophie to let him go, and Diana approaches from behind. Sophie tells him not to turn the lights on, but Martin runs to the lights. Sophie steps in front of Diana, but she pushes her and walks to Martin. He turns on the lights and she vanishes. Martin hurries out of the house. Rebecca and Brett are sitting and talking about what she found, and suddenly the door knocks. Rebecca goes to answer the door, and Martin is standing there. Brett goes to the store to buy food, and Martin tells Rebecca what happened at the house. She then starts telling him about what she discovered about Diana. Diana was found locked away in a basement at the age of 13, with her father having taken his own life. Rebecca describes Diana as having a strange skin disorder and a dark reputation, with rumors of her being evil and capable of manipulating people's minds. Rebecca explains that Diana and their mother met at Mulberry Hill Psychiatric Hospital. Diana influenced her mother's thoughts, making her believe they were friends. Rebecca thinks they can stop the connection with Diana by improving their mother's mental state. If you think this whole situation is crazy, subscribe to the channel. As they are talking, there is a knock on the door, and Rebecca goes to answer, thinking it was Brett coming back with food. But when she opens the door, no one was there. Then they hear a scratching in the closet, and Rebecca turns the closet light on and opens the door. But no one's there either. Brett is suddenly dragged from beneath the bed, and Rebecca grabs his hands and pulls him back. Whew, that was a close call. Rebecca, Brett, and Martin go to Sophie. While eating, Rebecca asks Sophie about Diana, referencing Martin's claim that she was at the house earlier. Sophie initially denied any knowledge, but became defensive when shown a photo of Diana. She insists that Diana was her friend and that the accusations are attempts to take Martin away from her again. Rebecca shows her the evidence of Diana's death, including her official death document, but Sophie dismisses it as potentially fake. Sophie accuses Rebecca of feeling guilty for not visiting her and suggests that the accusations are fueled by guilt. Sophie then reveals her belief that shutting Diana out would betray their friendship despite Diana's death. Rebecca is shocked by Sophie's claims, pointing out the nonsense of allowing a dead person to stay in their house. Sophie leaves the room and goes upstairs. Rebecca tells Martin that he would stay at her place tonight. Still, Martin insists on staying here because Sophie needs them. They decided to stay the night over and put on as much light as possible. They put tape on the switches to make them harder to turn off. Martin asks Rebecca to sleep with her, and she tells Brett that she would sleep with Martin and goes back. She goes to Sophie to tell her they would stay the night. Sophie opens the door and tells her that she wanted to start the conversation over tomorrow. She then hugs her, slipping a piece of paper into her hands. After the door closes, Rebecca sees, "I need help," written on the paper. They all sleep, and the lights are turned off. Rebecca goes to the basement to check the power breakers. Martin wakes up and calls for Rebecca. He picks up the candle and goes looking for her. When he leaves his room, Diana comes and pulls him, but he turns the candle towards her and manages to escape. He goes to the basement to find Rebecca, but Diana closes the door, trapping them. Brett comes and hears Rebecca from the basement. He goes to the door to open it, but it's locked. As he tries to open the door, Diana comes and makes him drop the flashlight. He then turns his phone on and she disappears. When his screen goes off, she attacks again. He manages to escape and goes outside, but she follows him. He escapes again by turning his car light on. He then gets in his car and drives away. Sophie gets up and tells Diana not to scare her children. Diana screams, and Sophie goes to take her pills, but Diana pushes her, making her fall and spill all of the pills. Martin and Rebecca find a black light in the basement. Rebecca takes it and navigates around the basement. She sees all kinds of notes by Diana on the wall. She was shocked by this, and then Diana shows up. She could clearly see her with the black light, but she didn't disappear. She tries to attack Rebecca, but Martin comes with a light and Diana disappears. Brett returns with the police. 2 cops enter the house and break the door to the basement to get Martin and Rebecca out. Then Diana shows up and kills one of the cops. The other follows, calling for backup, but Diana also kills her. Brett arrives and Rebecca urges him to take Martin while she walks upstairs to get Sophie. Upstairs, Rebecca overhears Diana telling her to stay away, or she would put her where her father was and attack her. She then throws her from the balcony. Sophie comes from behind and shoots her, but Diana claims she can't hurt her, to which Sophie responds, "I know." Sophie realizes that she is Diana's last connection to the real world and commits suicide to save Rebecca and Martin. Diana disappears as Sophie's body falls. In the movie's closing moments, Brett, Rebecca, and Martin sit together in the back of the ambulance, finding comfort in each other's company. The scene captures a sense of closure and resolution, signaling the end of their terrible experience and hinting at a hopeful future ahead. With this, the movie ends. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.